Well, look at him now. Not only has he done that, but he's launched his very own beer, and I'm here tonight to give it a try.
So this is the Hawkston Lager that we're launching tonight, and I want to make it absolutely plain. I didn't make it. Some actual qualified brewers, Rick, never made it.
One farm, one bold idea, and $1 billion beer industry that never saw it coming. Behind every bottle of beer is a massive network of farmers, suppliers, breweries, and corporations fighting for control of the ingredients that keep the industry alive. But somewhere far from the boardrooms and giant factories, one farm found a loophole in that system and turned it into a serious advantage. What started as a seemingly simple farming operation became a quiet challenge to some of the biggest players in beer. No massive corporation, no endless budget, just an unconventional strategy that forced an entire industry to pay attention. So how did one farm manage to beat the system that billion-dollar companies had spent decades perfecting? The grain nobody wanted. The story doesn't start with beer. It starts with barley, sitting in silos at Diddley Squat Farm in Chipping Norton, Oxfordshire, with nowhere good to go. Jeremy Clarkson had grown it the way farmers have grown barley for generations, watching the weather, fighting pests, praying the harvest held up. That part of farming hadn't changed. What had changed was the price he was offered for it. Grain buyers set the number, and farmers take it or leave it. For years, that number kept shrinking. Government subsidies that used to cushion bad years were being phased out. Costs for fuel, fertilizer, and equipment kept climbing. The math stopped working. Clarkson has said plainly that the trigger for the entire beer idea wasn't ambition, it was frustration. He had a surplus of barley and buyers who wouldn't pay a fair price for it. This wasn't a unique problem. It's one that British farmers have quietly lived with for decades. Grow the crop, hand it to a buyer, and watch someone further up the chain make the real profit. The farmer carries all the risk, the weather, the debt, the years that don't go well, and gets the smallest slice of the reward. Clarkson had a platform most farmers don't have, a television show that had already turned him into one of the most recognized faces in Britain. But even with that, the industry around him still expected him to behave like every other grain seller. Take the check, move on. Most people in his position would have done exactly that. Sell the grain, absorb the loss, and hope next season's price came back up. It's the quiet math that runs underneath most of British agriculture. A bet that things eventually even out, even when a bad year cuts deep. Clarkson had already lived through enough of those bad years on camera to know that betting on things evening out wasn't a strategy. It was just waiting. He didn't move on. Instead, he started asking a different question. What if he didn't sell the barley as barley? What if he turned it into something people would pay more for? Something with his name attached, something that skipped the buyers entirely. On paper, it sounded like a wild pivot for someone with zero brewing experience. In practice, it was the only version of the plan that made financial sense. Beer, unlike raw grain, isn't priced by a distant buyer squeezing margins. It's priced by what a customer is willing to hand over at a bar or a supermarket shelf. If Clarkson could turn his barley into a finished product, he would stop being a grain supplier at the bottom of the chain and become a brand controlling its own price. That shift, from raw commodity to finished product, is the single decision this entire story hinges on. It's worth pointing out how unusual this is for someone in his position. Farming is capital intensive and painfully slow to show results. Brewing is a different business entirely, with its own licensing, its own equipment, its own science. Clarkson wasn't blending two things he already understood. He was stepping into an industry that had nothing to do with his television career and very little overlap with growing crops. The barley crisis forced his hand, but the beer idea still required him to learn, fund, and build something from almost nothing. There was no guarantee any of it would work either. Plenty of side ventures launched by famous faces never make it past the planning stage, killed off quietly once the real cost and effort become clear. Clarkson had the money to absorb an early failure, but money alone doesn't fix a bad recipe or an indifferent market. What he was really betting on was that people would care enough about where their beer came from to choose it over something cheaper and more familiar. At the time, nobody in the beer world was paying attention. A TV presenter's farm having a bad grain season wasn't news inside boardrooms of companies moving billions of dollars in product every year. That gap in attention turned out to matter more than anyone in the beer industry realized. There's a broader context worth understanding here too. British farming has been under pressure for years, squeezed by rising fuel costs, unpredictable weather, and a slow reduction in the direct payments that used to soften bad seasons. Farmers were increasingly told the only way to survive was to get bigger, more mechanized, more efficient, chasing thinner margins at higher volume. Clarkson had spent several television seasons living through exactly that pressure, watching machinery break down, watching red tape slow down projects that should have taken weeks, and watching profit margins shrink no matter how hard the farm worked. The barley crisis wasn't an isolated bad week. It was the latest chapter in a much longer struggle that thousands of British farms were quietly fighting at the same time, mostly without cameras watching. Turning a loss into a brand. Deciding to make beer is one thing. Actually making it is another. Clarkson didn't have a brewery, a recipe, or any technical brewing background. What he had was barley, a farm shop, and an audience already watching his every move through Clarkson's farm. The documentary series following his attempts to run Diddley Squat. The first version of the beer didn't even work. Early batches were tested against a well-known local lager in a blind taste comparison, and Clarkson's beer lost. That's not a minor detail. It's the kind of setback that ends most side projects before they start. A lot of first-time founders would have taken that result as a sign to quietly drop the whole idea and go back to selling the barley for whatever price it could fetch. Instead of shelving the idea, the beer was reformulated. The team settled on a 4.8% ABV lager after input from the people actually working the farm, not a marketing department guessing at trends. That decision alone says something about how the project was run from the start. Most consumer products chasing a celebrity name behind them lean on outside agencies to shape the flavor profile around whatever tests well with focus groups. Hawkstone went the other way, trusting the instincts of the people closest to the land the barley came from. It's a small choice, but it set the tone for everything that followed. Build something real first, worry about polish later. The name itself tells you something about the intent behind the project. Hawkstone comes from a nearby Neolithic standing stone, not from a focus group. It was meant to signal something rooted in the land, not a celebrity gimmick slapped onto a bottle. Early branding ideas were reportedly far more tongue-in-cheek, playful names that leaned into Clarkson's public persona rather than the product itself. The team pulled back from that. Once they understood what proper brewing actually costs and what it takes to compete on shelf next to serious beer brands, they repositioned Hawkstone as a premium product rather than a joke. That decision to go premium rather than novelty is a big reason this story is different from every other celebrity-branded drink that's come and gone. Plenty of famous names have slapped their face on a bottle, taken the quick licensing fee, and let someone else handle production and quality. Hawkstone was structured differently from day one. The barley came from Clarkson's own farm. The brewing itself was handled near Bourton-on-the-Water in Gloucestershire, keeping the entire supply chain close to home instead of scattered across international contract manufacturers. Keeping production that close to the source wasn't the cheapest option available. It would have been far simpler and far more profitable in the short term to license the name out to an established brewing company and let them handle everything from sourcing to bottling. That's the well-worn playbook for celebrity drinks, and it's exactly the playbook Hawkstone avoided. Staying close to the farm meant slower growth and tighter margins early on. But it also meant the story being sold to customers was actually true, not just marketing copy layered on top of a product made somewhere else entirely. Launch timing didn't help. Hawkstone came out in late 2020, in the middle of a pandemic that had shut down pubs, the exact venues where a new beer brand usually builds its reputation. Most new drinks brands rely on bartenders recommending them, on people trying something new on a night out. None of that was available. Hawkstone had to find its audience almost entirely through direct sales and the built-in reach of Clarkson's farm, which had already turned Diddley Squat into one of the most talked-about farms in the country. That existing audience turned out to be the advantage no traditional brewery could easily replicate. Viewers who had already watched Clarkson battle machinery breakdowns, planning permission fights, and brutal weather had an emotional stake in whether the farm succeeded. Buying a bottle of Hawkstone wasn't just buying a beer. It was buying into a story people had already spent hours watching unfold. That's not something a marketing department can manufacture with a big enough ad budget. It has to be earned, and in this case, it had already been earned through years of documentary footage most brands could never afford to produce. There's a lesson in that timing too, even if it wasn't intentional. Launching without pub access should have crippled Hawkstone's chances. Instead, it forced the brand to build a direct relationship with customers from day one, rather than depending on bartenders and distributors to make the introduction. By the time pubs reopened, Hawkstone wasn't walking through the door as a stranger looking for a chance. It already had people asking for it by name. By the time the pandemic eased and pubs reopened, Hawkstone wasn't a total unknown trying to break into a crowded market from zero. It already had a name, a story, and a loyal starting audience willing to seek it out. It's also worth remembering how much could have gone wrong at this stage. New beverage brands fail constantly, even ones with far bigger marketing budgets and established distribution deals. A recipe that needed reformulating, a launch during a global pandemic, and zero experience running a brewery would have been enough to sink most first attempts. What kept Hawkstone alive through that fragile early period wasn't luck. It was the willingness to fix what wasn't working, rather than rush a flawed product to market just to hit a launch date. That patience, choosing quality over speed, even when the beer industry expected a quick celebrity cash-in, ended up being one of the quiet reasons the brand survived long enough to prove itself. Just a celebrity side project. For a long stretch, the beer industry didn't take Hawkstone seriously. And honestly, the skepticism made sense on paper. Celebrity-branded drinks have a well-worn reputation for being short-lived cash grabs. A famous face signs a licensing deal, collects a fee, and someone else handles everything from brewing to distribution. Quality is inconsistent. Interest fades within a year or two. Industry veterans had seen this pattern play out dozens of times. So when a television presenter announced he was launching a lager made from his own farm's barley, the assumption was that this would follow the same script. That assumption wasn't unreasonable given Clarkson's public image either. He was, and still is, best known for cars, controversy, and a sharp comedic persona built over decades on Top Gear and the Grand Tour. Nothing about that resume screamed serious beverage entrepreneur. Add to that the fact that his farming venture itself had, by his own admission on camera, been a chaotic string of expensive mistakes, and it's easy to see why nobody in a corporate boardroom flagged Hawkstone as a threat worth studying. Even people who liked Clarkson's television work were skeptical at first. A famous face trying farming for a documentary is one thing, entertaining television, low financial stakes for the viewer. A famous face asking people to actually spend their own money on a beer he made is a different kind of trust altogether. Plenty of viewers assumed this would go the way most celebrity products go, a short burst of curiosity purchases from fans, followed by the product quietly disappearing from shelves within a year once the novelty wore off. There's a deeper reason the dismissal ran so deep, though. Major brewing companies compete primarily on scale, distribution networks, and marketing budgets that dwarf what a single farm could ever spend. Their entire competitive model is built around outspending smaller players until they either get acquired or fade out. A regional lager tied to one farm's barley supply didn't fit any threat model they were tracking. It looked too small, too niche, too dependent on one person's celebrity to ever become a real competitor on supermarket shelves. What that assessment missed was the thing that actually made Hawkstone dangerous. Authenticity that couldn't be bought. Big brewers can outspend a small brand on advertising, but they can't manufacture years of documentary footage showing a real farmer growing real barley and fighting real setbacks to turn it into beer. That kind of story either exists or it doesn't, and Clarkson's farm had already built it before the beer even reached shelves. Executives who thought this was a marketing exercise a bigger company could simply copy were missing the point entirely. There's also a pattern worth naming here, because it shows up again and again across industries. Established players tend to underestimate outsiders who don't look like traditional competitors. A farmer entering the beer business doesn't trigger the same alarm bells as a rival brewery launching a new product line, even when the underlying threat, a brand consumers trust and actively want to support, is arguably more dangerous long-term. By the time Hawkstone's sales numbers started showing up in retail data, the story had already shifted from celebrity side project to something the industry could no longer wave away. The turning point wasn't a single dramatic event. It was a slow accumulation of retail wins that eventually became too large to dismiss as a fluke. Look at how differently the beer industry treats threats that come from inside its own ranks. When a new craft brewery launches with backing from an established distributor, competitors study it immediately, tracking its pricing, its packaging, its marketing spend. That same scrutiny simply wasn't applied here, because Hawkstone didn't arrive through any of the usual channels the industry watches. It arrived through a farm shop, a television series, and word of mouth, none of which show up on a competitor analysis spreadsheet until sales figures force their way into the conversation. By then, the brand already had a head start that money alone couldn't easily buy back. The shelf space nobody expected. Numbers are where skepticism usually goes to die, and Hawkstone's numbers did exactly that. Within roughly 2 years of launch, the brand had secured national listings with some of the biggest grocery chains in the United Kingdom, including Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, and Morrison's. That's not a minor achievement. Getting shelf space at that level typically requires either an established distribution relationship or enough proven consumer demand to convince a retail buyer to take the risk. Hawkstone had neither advantage that a major brewing conglomerate would normally bring to the negotiating table. What it had instead was demand that retailers could actually measure. Reports on the brand's performance describe it outperforming several established craft beers in the same category, not just surviving next to them. For a product that started as a way to salvage unsellable barley, that's a remarkable reversal. The company built around it has since been valued at approximately £75 million, a figure that puts it firmly in serious business territory, rather than hobby project territory. Growth didn't stop at lager either. In 2022, Hawkstone expanded into a Pilsner, an IPA, and a cider, broadening its shelf presence and giving retailers more reasons to stock the brand across multiple categories. The cider in particular drew attention for sourcing traditional British apples from regions like the Vale of Evesham and the Cotswolds, deliberately avoiding the mass-market approach most large cider producers rely on. That expansion pattern mirrors how successful beverage brands typically scale, layering new products onto an established trust base, rather than chasing every trend simultaneously. The brand also introduced lower alcohol options along the way, responding to a wider shift in drinking habits, rather than sticking rigidly to a single flagship lager. That kind of responsiveness is normally associated with agile startups, not farm-based side projects. And it's another sign that whatever Hawkstone was in its earliest days, it had grown into something run with real commercial discipline behind the scenes. None of this happened without friction. In 2026, Hawkstone issued a recall notice over an undeclared ingredient concern related to wheat and gluten content, a reminder that even a fast-growing farm-based brand isn't immune to the same regulatory and safety standards that govern the entire industry. It's a detail worth including, precisely because it shows this isn't some flawless underdog fairy tale. Hawkstone has had to operate under real scrutiny, real compliance requirements, and real consequences when something goes wrong. The same pressures every major brewer navigates daily. That's actually part of what makes the growth story credible rather than exaggerated. A brand this size, sitting on major retail shelves and drawing regulatory attention when there's an issue, isn't a niche curiosity anymore. It's operating at a scale where mistakes get noticed nationally, where recalls make headlines, and where retail buyers are making real financial bets on continued performance. Getting into Tesco once might be a favor. Staying on shelves at 4 major chains for years, expanding product lines, and drawing regulatory scrutiny when something slips. That's an operating business competing on merit. Ambitions haven't stopped at the UK border either. Reporting on the brand describes global growth plans on the table, alongside potential pub acquisitions. Moves that would put Hawkstone in direct competition with breweries many times its size on their own turf. Whether that international expansion fully materializes remains to be seen, but the intent alone signals that this was never meant to stay a small farm shop curiosity. The trajectory has been steadily upward, from unsellable barley in a grain store to a brand actively planning international growth. Retail buyers don't hand over shelf space based on sentiment, no matter how compelling the backstory is. Every listing decision comes down to sell-through data, repeat purchase rates, and whether a product earns its place against dozens of competitors fighting for the same square footage. Hawkstone kept that shelf space and kept expanding it, which means customers weren't just buying it once out of curiosity. They were coming back. That repeat behavior is the real signal separating a passing novelty from an actual competitor. And it's the exact signal that eventually forced the wider industry to stop treating this as a joke. What the big brewers missed. Step back from Hawkstone specifically, and a bigger pattern comes into focus, one that should worry every major brewing company, far more than a single farm's beer brand ever could. For decades, the industry has competed largely on scale, cost efficiency, and marketing spend. Ingredients get sourced globally, wherever it's cheapest. Branding gets built by agencies, not by the people actually growing the raw materials. Consumers buy beer the way they buy most groceries, based on habit, price, and whatever's on the shelf at eye level. Hawkstone succeeded by rejecting nearly every part of that model. The barley comes from one identifiable farm. The story behind the product isn't manufactured by a creative agency. It's documented on camera across multiple television seasons. Customers aren't just buying a beverage. They're buying into a visible, traceable relationship between the field and the bottle. That's an incredibly difficult thing for a multinational brewing company to replicate. Not because they lack the resources, but because their entire supply chain is built around anonymity and scale, not traceability and story. There's a cultural shift underneath all of this that goes beyond one brand's success. Consumers, particularly younger ones, have shown a growing willingness to pay more for products they can trace back to a real source. Farm-to-table dining proved this in the restaurant industry years ago. Direct-to-consumer coffee roasters proved it in specialty coffee. Hawkstone is proving the same appetite exists in beer, a category that had seemed almost entirely commoditized, competing purely on price and brand recognition built through decades of advertising spend. This matters enormously for farmers beyond Clarkson's own operation. British agriculture has spent years being squeezed from multiple directions, shrinking subsidies, rising input costs, and buyers who hold nearly all the pricing power. The traditional advice handed to struggling farmers has been to consolidate, scale up, and cut costs to survive on razor-thin margins. Hawkstone demonstrates a different path entirely, one where a farmer captures more of the final retail value by refusing to sell a raw commodity and building a finished, branded product instead. None of this means every farmer can replicate the exact playbook. Clarkson had a television platform most farmers will never have, along with financial resources to absorb early losses, while the beer recipe and branding got sorted out. That advantage is real, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. But the underlying lesson doesn't depend entirely on celebrity. It's about who controls the final pricing decision in a supply chain, the raw material producer at the bottom, or the finished brand sitting on a retail shelf. That's the real threat Hawkstone represents to the billion-dollar beer industry, and it has very little to do with market share numbers, at least for now. It's a working demonstration that the old power structure, where buyers dictate terms to farmers and farmers simply absorb whatever price they're offered, isn't actually as fixed as it looks. Once one example proves that a different model works, at national retail scale no less, it becomes much harder for the entire industry to pretend that structure is the only option available. Whether more farmers follow this exact path or not, the beer industry now has to reckon with something it didn't take seriously a few years ago. A product built on transparency and traceability can outcompete decades of brand equity and marketing muscle, if the story behind it is real. There's an uncomfortable question sitting underneath all of this, for the big brewers too. If one farm with no brewing background can build a £75 million brand simply by refusing to accept a bad price and telling an honest story, how much value has the wider industry been quietly extracting from farmers for decades under the old model? Hawkstone doesn't answer that question directly, but its success makes it a lot harder to avoid asking it. And once shoppers start wondering where their pint actually comes from, brand loyalty built purely on decades of advertising starts to look a lot less secure than it used to. That's how one farmer's frustration turned into a brand the beer industry never saw coming. No hidden trick, no shortcut, just a decision to stop accepting the price he was handed and start building something that carried his own name. Hawkstone isn't just a good story, it's proof that the old rules around who controls the profit in farming aren't as fixed as everyone assumed. If you enjoyed learning how this actually happened, hit like so more people can see it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, and let me know in the comments, would you actually try a beer made from a farm you'd watched on television? See you in the next video.